The ferry had been delayed by 3 hours, and somewhere in that waiting, I ended up with my kit open on a plastic chair in the corner of a terminal that smelled like diesel and old coffee. His name was Marco. He told me that approximately 40 seconds after sitting down next to me, which was also approximately 40 seconds after he noticed the small medical bag on my lap, and said in a voice that was trying very hard to sound casual, "You're not, like, a nurse or something, are you?" I looked at him over my shoulder. Late 30s, maybe, dark circles that had clearly been there a while. One hand pressed flat against his thigh, in that specific way people do when they're trying to hide a tremor. "Something like that," I said. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath since Tuesday. Here's what I've learned about strangers in transit. They tell you the truth faster than anyone else. There's something about being in motion, or waiting to be in motion, that loosens people. They're already between one place and another. A little honesty doesn't feel like such a risk. Marco had been traveling for almost 2 days. He was on his way back from visiting his father, who was not doing well, and he'd left in such a hurry that he'd forgotten to pack his insulin pen. He had a backup vial, old habit, he said. His mother had drilled it into him, and a syringe still in its packaging, which he'd bought at a pharmacy 2 towns back. But he hadn't done an injection himself in years. His doctor's office handled it. His wife handled it. And now it was late in the evening. His blood sugar was climbing, and his hands were shaking more than mine, which, considering I was the one about to hold the needle, was saying something. "Okay," I said, and I pulled my chair a little closer. "Tell me what you have." He showed me the vial. It was a short-acting insulin analog. Clear, not cloudy, which mattered. Cloudy insulin, the kind that looks slightly milky, needs to be gently rolled between the palms before use, never shaken. But clear insulin goes in as is. I checked the expiration, checked the seal, checked that the liquid had no particles floating in it. All good. "Have you eaten recently?" I asked. "A granola bar, maybe 2 hours ago." "And what's your usual dose?" He knew that, at least. 12 units before meals. He'd been meaning to eat a real meal once he got on the ferry, so the timing was actually reasonable. I put on my gloves. I always carry a pair. The thin nitrile ones, powder-free, because I cannot stand the feeling of powder on my fingertips when I'm working. And I set everything out on the empty seat beside him. Vial, syringe, alcohol swab, a small piece of gauze. "Where do you usually get it?" I asked. "Stomach," he said. "My wife does it in the stomach." "That's perfect," I said. "The abdomen is actually one of the best sites for insulin. It absorbs fastest and most consistently. We'll use that." He lifted his shirt a little, and I talked him through it while I worked, because that's the thing about nervous patients. Silence is the enemy. Silence lets the fear fill up all the available space. So you talk. Not to distract exactly, more to give them something to hold on to. I told him we were going to use the area a couple of inches away from the navel, not directly on it, not right at the waistband. There's a soft, relatively even layer of subcutaneous tissue there, just under the skin, sitting above the muscle. That's where we want the insulin to go. Not into the muscle. That would change the absorption rate, make it work too fast. Not just under the surface of the skin either, right in that middle layer, the fatty tissue. The angle for that is about 45 degrees if someone is lean, or closer to 90 degrees if there's more tissue. You want the needle to reach the right depth without going through. Marco had enough subcutaneous tissue that I could go straight in at 90 degrees without a problem. "Pinch up a little," I told him, showing him with my own fingers on the back of my hand. "Like this. You're just lifting the tissue slightly. It helps make sure you're in the right layer." He did it. His fingers were still trembling, but less now. Focused hands tremble less than idle ones. I've noticed that. I drew up the correct dose, tapped the syringe once to let any air bubble rise, and pressed the plunger just enough to push the air out. A tiny bead of insulin appeared at the tip. That's how you know it's ready. Take a slow breath in, I said, and let it out. He breathed. I went in smoothly, a quick, confident entry, because hesitation is what makes injections hurt. The needle was in before he'd finished exhaling. I pressed the plunger slowly, steadily, counting to about 5 in my head. Then I waited another 5 seconds before withdrawing, because insulin needs a moment to disperse before you pull out. If you rush it, some of it follows the needle back out, and you lose part of the dose. I withdrew, pressed the gauze gently over the spot. No rubbing. Rubbing can speed absorption unpredictably and sometimes causes bruising. Just light pressure. That's it, I said. He looked down at his stomach like he expected to find something dramatic there. There was nothing. A small white mark from the gauze, already fading. That was nothing, he said. It usually is, I said. The anticipation is always the hard part. He laughed, a real one, a little surprised at himself, and I started capping the syringe for safe disposal. Never recap with 2 hands. That's how needle stick injuries happen. 1 hand, needle into the cap lying flat on a surface, then press. Or just use a sharps container if you have one. I had a small travel one. I always have a small travel one. We sat there for a little while after that. The terminal was quieter now. The earlier crowd had thinned, and the announcement board still said delayed in orange letters that had started to feel personal. He told me about his father. Not the medical details, just the way his father's apartment smelled the same as it always had, even now. Coffee and something wooden. The way his father had held his hand when he was leaving, which his father had never done before, not once in 30-something years. I didn't say anything for a moment. Sometimes the right response to something like that is just to let it sit in the air for a second before you touch it. How's your pressure been lately? I asked eventually, gently steering us back to something I could actually help with. Any headaches? Tension in the neck? He thought about it. Actually, yeah, the last few days. Stress, travel, disrupted sleep, probably not enough water. All of it adds up. High blood pressure doesn't always announce itself with dramatic symptoms. Sometimes it's just a dull ache behind the eyes, a heaviness at the base of the skull. I told him that if it continued when he got home, it was worth getting a reading done. Not to alarm himself, just to have the information. Blood pressure is one of those things that's easy to check and easy to ignore, and the only one of those options that causes problems is the second one. He nodded like he was actually going to remember that. The ferry announcement came about 20 minutes later. We both stood, gathered our things. He zipped his jacket. I snapped my bag closed. "Thank you," he said. And then, because he seemed like someone who meant things when he said them, "I mean it, really." "I know," I said. He hesitated for just a second, the way people do when they want to say something else and then decide against it. Then he smiled, picked up his bag, and walked toward the gate. I watched him go and thought about his father's apartment, the coffee smell, the wooden thing underneath it, the hand that had never reached out before, and then finally did, when there wasn't much time left to reach. There's a kind of care that has nothing to do with medicine, and then there's the kind that does. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to offer both in the same evening, in a plastic chair in a ferry terminal that smells like